What would you do if a few months into your first job after HUC, you were faced with a dilemma for which you felt totally unprepared? A few weeks ago, Dr. Adler shared a story from Rabbi Dina Sussman, who served Central Reform Congregation in St. Louis, Missouri. In her very first year as a rabbi in the St. Louis area, she's faced questions about her role as a public leader in the community following the death of Michael Brown. The protest in Ferguson, attended by hundreds of clergy from the St. Louis area and around the country, including Rabbi Sussman's own senior clergy, sparked tough questions that she never imagined having to consider. What issues do I feel strongly enough about to be on the streets for? Am I prepared to be arrested? What if there's tear gas or pepper spray? Rabbi Sussman shared her frustration that she hadn't been better prepared to make these decisions. After Dr. Adler shared this story, one of my classmates asked quietly, "But is HUC supposed to teach this stuff to us?" In the walls of this building, all of us, regardless of program, are prepared for many aspects of our future jobs through professional development and Judaic studies courses. We are ready to take on roles as Jewish leaders within the Jewish community and its many institutions. Yet we will also be public leaders, leaders in our cities who are called upon to bring a Jewish voice into the public square at times of moral crisis, at moments of communal remembrance, and at seasons of national rejoicing. We have a role to play in the public square, an opportunity to bring our voices and our values to bear on the major crises and opportunities of our time, and our responsibility to speak and to lead when we cannot stand idly by. By virtue of being here at HUC, we've already accepted the unique responsibilities of Jewish leadership. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, Sav et Aharon ve'et banav. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Command Aaron and his sons." Our parasha opens with God instructing Moses to single out Aaron and his sons, the ritual leaders of the community, for a special set of instructions. The priests are tasked with the holy work of ritual slaughter and the upkeep of the Mishkan. Jewish leaders throughout history have continually been entrusted with holy work, although our definition of holy work has shifted over time. We have progressed from priests responsible for the Mishkan to rabbis engaged in the particular Jewish work of life cycles and halachic decision-making, to Jewish communal leaders whose responsibility extends beyond the Jewish community into the public sphere. Our role as Jewish leaders has been challenged and redefined over the centuries, but we don't have a clear-cut guidebook, like the book of Leviticus, to instruct us how to lead in this expanded role. This responsibility as public leaders is not new to our current context of American democracy. Before the Haskalah in the 19th century, our people were confined to the ghettos of Europe. Their lives ran according to Jewish rhythms, and the walls of the ghetto, while offering protection, also isolated them from the public sphere. To be a Jewish leader meant being a leader of Jews, without concern for what happened beyond the walls of the ghetto, except for when it directly impacted life inside the ghetto. But the isolation of the ghetto didn't satisfy our people, and the emancipation enabled Jews to become citizens of the modern world. Ber Isaac Ber, a French-Jewish businessman, recognized that merely taking on the title of active citizen wasn't enough. Citizenship requires work. The rights of the citizen came with responsibility to be an engaged and active citizen. We left the walls of the ghetto behind and threw ourselves into European society, bringing Jewish voices to bear on the ideological and political issues of the day. Our people continued to accept the rights and responsibilities of citizenship as we embraced the American dream. In 1964, a group of 17 Reform rabbis and leaders answered this call to act on behalf of justice and their Jewish values. The group was arrested in St. Augustine, Florida, for a courageous act of collective public leadership to desegregate the South. The group, including our teacher, Rabbi Levy, knew the risks of their leadership, just as Dina Sussman did, and they acted. Their act of civil disobedience was part of their rabbinates. In a letter these rabbis wrote during that night in jail, they said, "We came to St. Augustine mainly because we could not stay away. We came because we could not stand quietly by our brother's blood. We had done that too many times before. We have been vocal in our exhortation of others, but the idleness of our hands too often revealed an inner silence. Silence at a time when silence has become the unpardonable sin of our time." These rabbis could not ignore the call to public leadership. They were not satisfied to limit their leadership to standing behind a pulpit and exhorting others to act. They redefined holy work, responding to the needs of their communities and the urgent crisis of their day. These rabbis brought their leadership into the public square as Jews, as rabbis, and as citizens. They could not ignore their responsibility by remaining silent. We take so much pride in our predecessors who acted publicly that we question when their stories are left out of the narrative. Following the release of the film Selma earlier this year, numerous articles in the Jewish press asked, "Where are the Jews?" Critics debated whether or not the film distorted history by not portraying the role of Jews, especially Jewish clergy, in the march from Selma to Birmingham. Of course our community wanted to claim our role in this story. We're proud of our legacy of social activism and public leadership, and we show that pride when we retell the stories of those who march proudly for justice. Yet I wonder, is this proud retelling of our stories the only or even the best use of our legacy? When our predecessors, the Jews of the Haskalah, the rabbis arrested in St. Augustine, when they passed on their mantle of public leadership, did they want us to be satisfied with telling their stories? Or did they want us to take on that mantle of leadership and march into the public square today? What if, in addition to questioning where the Jews were in a cinematic representation of something that happened 50 years ago, we turned to Ferguson and other seminal moments in the life of our country today and asked, where are the Jews now? We can look to our colleagues who have responded to this call with action, like Rabbi Susan Talvi, who's Dina Sussman's senior rabbi in St. Louis, Rabbi Jill Jacobs of Trua, and the rabbis throughout the country who are leading community organizing and social justice efforts in their own communities. Our inheritance is more than just a story to proudly retell. It comes with a responsibility to act, to march forward. Rashi notices a key difference between the opening of Parshat Tzav and God's previous set of instructions in Parshat Vayikra. Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav, command Aaron and his sons, are the words God uses to instruct Moses at the opening of this week's portion. In Vayikra, however, God instructs Moses to speak, daber, to all of Bnei Yisrael. Rashi picks up on the unique nature of the responsibilities for the priestly class, reflected in the use of the verb tzav. Rashi explains that tzav is only used as language of ziruz, of urgency. Tzav is used to urge both the present and future generations to rush into action. Our predecessors took this urgency to heart and did not hesitate to act. What is urgent for us and for our generation? Aaron and the priests had an external voice, God's command as refracted through Moses, to guide them towards what was urgent and pressing. We are not nearly so lucky. On a given day, any number of issues might come before us, more than we can ever act on effectively. Part of our role as Jewish public leaders is to decide what is urgent and important for us and for our communities, in partnership with our communities and lay leadership. Being a public leader does not require us to always join with the most radical causes or to only exercise leadership by protesting in the streets. Being a leader in the public square includes building relationships with other clergy and communal leaders across the lines of race, class, and faith. Leading in the public square calls us to know the hearts of our people, to know what it is that breaks their hearts when they look at the world around them. As Jewish leaders, we're prepared to offer informed opinions on any number of Jewish issues: Israel, intermarriage, the future of the Jewish people. We stay informed about these issues and others that are discussed and debated in our Jewish public square. We need to hold ourselves to the same standard with regards to the key issues facing our cities and our country today. Rabbis, cantors, educators, and other Jewish professionals need to be as informed about the major issues being debated in city halls as we are about intermarriage and Israel. It is our job to create space in our institutions for our people to debate these issues and form their own opinions. As Jewish leaders, we cannot remain silent when faced with the suffering of another. The rabbis arrested in St. Augustine knew this deep in their hearts when they risked arrest because they could not stand idly by the blood of another human. When we limit the definition of a Jewish issue, we isolate ourselves behind the walls of our synagogues, effectively re-ghettoizing our communities. We give up the responsibilities that our European predecessors embraced as they left the ghetto behind during the Haskalah. We return the inheritance that the rabbis of the civil rights era have bequeathed to us. This Shabbat, the last Shabbat before Pesach, is Shabbat Hagadol. We read a haftarah from Malachi, which describes our final redemption. God declares, V'karavti alechem lamishpat. Then I will draw near to you for justice. I myself will be swift to witness against those who extort the wages of workers, who oppress widows and orphans, and who thrust aside strangers. We lift up this vision of our ultimate redemption even before we sit at the Seder table and look backwards to retell our history. We know how much work we need to do in the world in order to reach the world as it should be, to bridge the gap between past, present, and future. At our Seders next weekend, we have the opportunity to immerse ourselves in the inspirational texts of the Haggadah, to imagine a vision of a world repaired. As we sit around our Seder tables, we can allow the Passover story to sink into our souls and transform who we are and the work that we do in the world. We cannot be satisfied with retelling the stories of our predecessors who bravely pursued justice, risking their own lives and careers. Those stories, too, have the power to rise up from the pages of history books and transform our work, our communities, and our world today. This Pesach, let us be open to the possibility of transformation. Instead of merely retelling stories of public leaders from generations past, let us open ourselves up to be transformed and moved to action by our history. Let us respond to the urgency of now with brave leadership and create new stories as we march together into the public square. So Harayim Tovim.